G'day legends, Sunken Dutchman here. Got Jono as well today. We're going to go out and try and smack some flatties, or whatever's out there. Try and get a feed. Beautiful day, not a breath of wind, pretty flat. Looking forward to it. We'll see you out there on the water. We jumped in the water and we were greeted with some fantastic viz. The first thing I like to do when I'm looking for flatties is actually find a weed edge or a good patch of weedy or grassy seabed and just start scouting around. When you hunt for flatties, it's very dependent on the type of species as to what ground you're looking for. Obviously the sand and the tiger, they're found out on sand. The Rockies are found in weedy grass or rocks, sort of reefy areas. And then your dusky flathead are found in estuaries. Duskies are sort of hard to spearfish in Vic, mainly because you're not allowed to spear in inland waters. This was actually the second flatty that I'd found in the session. The first one I didn't have my camera on, it sort of took me by surprise, but found this guy just lying in the seagrass and thought, yep, I'm going to take him home. He was a good size. As with all fish, as soon as I get my hands on the flatty, I bleed them and then gut them in the water. The bleeding just preserves the eating quality, and the gutting saves me a bit of mess at home when I'm filleting them up. This was the third flatty I found during the session. As you can see, they're super well camouflaged. So I suppose a tip, if you are looking for them, is to go really slow. Don't swim around like a mad chook and try and cover hundreds of kilometers of ground. Just take your time to really look at everything, look through the weed as well, and try and identify a break in the pattern in the seabed to something, and more often than not, it'll be a flatty. This was the next one I came across. Again, I'm always amazed at how well these things can camouflage into their surroundings. Even when you zoom in, they're super hard to spot. So, like I said before, when you are trying to hunt for them, slowing everything down means that you're not going to inadvertently swim over one. I know I've probably swum over hundreds in the past, but yeah, I always got to remind myself just to slow down and look at everything. This next one that I found, when I shot it, I didn't stone it, which I always try and do when I'm shooting flathead, and the spear went quite far into the sand, and the fish actually strung itself on my line. So I was sort of playing it a little bit careful just when trying to grab the fish, just because flatties have these backwards facing barbs on the sides of their head. Now they're not super venomous, but they do, pack a little bit of a punch. If you've been tagged before, you know what it's all about. I've copped a few in my time, but just be careful if you're handling one for the first time and you've never seen one before. This was the sixth and last fish that I shot for the session. I didn't stone him, which I always like to do when I'm hunting flathead, but I put him out of his misery pretty quickly. But yeah, I've never sort of taken my bag limit of flathead. I think 20 fish is a bit excessive, but obviously if you've got a big family and a few mouths to feed, by all means take your limit. But yeah, 6 fish was more than enough for me. I feel that taking what you need, not what you can, is a good thing to do. It leaves fish for other people, and it also leaves fish for you in the future to come back and hunt and have a good time on another occasion. Another good tip I can give is if you've shot your spear into sand or rock or clay or whatever and the flopper's jammed, it's always a good idea to clean it before you forget and have a shot at another fish, and then it doesn't engage and that fish pops off the end of your shaft. Like I said, I was done. I had my full 6 fish, but I came across this little guy on the way back in, and yeah, I thought, well, rather than shoot him, I'll just go down and film him and say hi. Alright, so I'm going to show you how I fillet up flathead. The flathead have been on ice overnight. I always like to fillet my fish a day later and put them on ice. It just sets the flesh and it makes it actually easier to fillet, to be honest. So yeah, these have been resting for a day. I'm just going to do one side, but obviously the same process applies to both sides of the fish. But just for the purposes of keeping it quick, I'm just going to do one side. So I go to take the fillet off. I go under this second fin here. And then I cut at a pretty hard angle back towards the head, like that. Free the meat up. Turn my knife around and just cut through the rib bones all the way along the spine. Now sometimes their spines can be a little bit bumpy, so you just have to wiggle your knife over it, but try and keep a hard edge right against that spine so you're not losing any meat. So that frees the fillet up. I just like to keep my knife clean from all the scales. Now when I'm taking the skin off, I just like to make a little incision just at the base of the tail where the flesh is. Just cut the flesh down to the skin, right?
Dad,
And then, yeah, bud.
did you tell him I had fish before?
Yeah, you have had fish before. And then all I'm doing is basically peeling the flesh off the skin. This is quite easy to do with rock flathead. It's less easy to do with the sand flatties or the tiger flatties, and the duskies are probably the hardest to peel. But I just peel, that way I'm not losing any meat. And when I get to the rib cage, you'll be able to find it. You'll feel bones. That's when I get my knife in and I just start to free it up with the knife. Just wiggle it. Keep your knife flat against the board. Like that. And that frees up the fillet. I'll move that to the side for a second. I always like to keep my work surface as clean as I possibly can. But that frees up the fillet there, as you can see. There's a row of bones up the middle, the pin bones, and then there's obviously the ribs. So what I like to do is I cut out the pin bones. So you can feel them in a flatty. They're pretty prominent. They run up the middle of the fillet. So I like to cut hard up against them, and I basically let the knife. I let the pin bones guide the knife, and I just cut down nice and slowly, hard up against that edge, and then that frees up the fillet. Now they're a little backwards facing, as in they face. When I'm like that, they face like that. So just make sure you get the bottom end of them when you're cutting out the pin bones. That's the last one there. Now the other side, I go hard up against them and I cut through the ribs. And I just cut down until I get to the base of that last pin bone. That's it. Now that's pretty much all the meat, that thin little strip. If you've got a cat or a dog, they love it, but that's all the meat that's lost off a flatty fillet. In terms of the ribs, now some people fillet out the ribs, like cut them out, but you're left with this paper thin piece of meat here. And flatties only have 3 rib bones on each side. So I like to use a pair of tweezers, and I basically just find the rib bones like that, and I just pull them out. So that's one there. Sometimes they're a bit tricky to get. That's 2 there.
Dad,
Yes, mate?
I have ribs.
You have ribs too?
Yeah.
That's true. And the last one is here. Oops. That one's in half. Sometimes if you, that's the other half there. But essentially, that's it. And now you've got heaps of meat left on that side. You don't have a paper fin fillet. And that is a boneless flatty fillet ready to be cooked up and eaten. Happy days. Get out there and have a crack.